Welcome to Life Stories, where the law isn't always just, and silence can be more dangerous than violence. What would you do if your little brother was labeled a criminal without evidence, and the only thing standing between him and a life destroyed was you? What if, when you walked into a courtroom to defend him, the very system meant to protect you kicked you to the ground in front of everyone? This is not a story about revenge. It's about what happens when truth walks into a room that spent years learning how to look away. Power, fear, and a woman who dared to stand up without raising her voice until the world had no choice but to listen. Let's step inside the courtroom where everything cracked, and nothing has ever been the same since. The courtroom was dead quiet, like it had forgotten how to breathe. Somewhere above the chipped tiles and flickering fluorescent lights, a fly buzzed. No one dared swat it. In courtroom 12 of Southside Chicago's Municipal Hall, nothing ever really moved, except time. And that only marched in one direction, toward conviction. Malik Johnson, 17, sat stiff in a suit too big for his frame. His knees bounced under the table like he was rehearsing escape. But he wasn't guilty. Not of the theft, not of anything. The gold watch in question had been returned. But no one cared about the nuance. Not when you're a black teenager in a gray t-shirt standing beside an old white man and a stolen object. It only took 3 words from Officer Travis Cole. Looks like him. And the cuffs had clicked shut, like the jaws of the city itself. Cole stood against the wall now, arms folded, a predator masquerading as public servant. His uniform was flawless, as always, but his eyes were the giveaway, dead cruel, and watching Malik like a roach on polished glass. This was his courtroom. Everyone knew that. Not the judge, not the jury. Just Cole, the man who made fear feel procedural. The defense attorney barely spoke. She didn't challenge the lack of evidence, didn't mention the missing footage. She muttered something about youthful misjudgment, then sat back like she'd run out of oxygen. Malik didn't blame her. He'd stopped expecting help days ago. Until the door opened. She didn't knock, didn't ask. Jordan Avery walked in with a black coat, a blue folder, and a silence so heavy it made the ceiling groan. No badge on her chest, no entourage, just poise so sharp it cut the air. She looked like she'd just come from a funeral, and in some way, maybe she had. Cole noticed her too late. When he turned, his mouth was already halfway to a smirk, but then something in her eyes stopped him. She didn't blink, she didn't smile, she didn't look at him like a threat. She looked at him like an answer. The judge squinted, lips pursed, as if trying to remember if he'd met this woman before. He hadn't. But that didn't matter. Jordan didn't need recognition. She needed to be seen. "Ma'am, you are disrupting." The clerk began, but then froze when she stepped forward. Cole intercepted her path, his voice low, sardonic. "This isn't your space." Her response was silence. "Who do you think you are?" he asked again, louder this time, jaw tightening. Still nothing. And that's when Cole, man of protocol, star of police fundraisers, 3-time recipient of the mayor's citation for public stability, lost it. "You're here to defend this little thief? You're all the same. Trash, every one of you." His voice shattered the room like glass hitting marble. The judge went pale. A stenographer dropped his pen. Someone in the back gasped, and a phone tilted ever so slightly, just enough to start recording. But Jordan? She didn't flinch. "You are speaking to someone who has not been convicted," she said, her voice like gravel and grace rolled into one. "And you're calling him trash before he's even spoken. That says more about you than it does about him." Then came the twist. "My name is Jordan Avery," she said, lifting the folded document to her chest. "I am the newly appointed chief of police for the city of Chicago. My appointment became official this morning. You may confirm it with the mayor's office." Cole blinked. Not because he doubted her, but because, for the first time in years, he'd been seen, and not as a protector, as the very thing justice had come to confront. The silence cracked. A young officer near the exit took half a step forward. A reporter whispered, "Is she serious?" And Malik Johnson, still handcuffed, turned around, not to look for help, but to witness the shift of gravity in the room. Cole's face twitched. He could have backed off. He didn't. Instead, his boot rose, fast, brutal, practiced, and slammed into Jordan Avery's chest. She flew back into the bench, folder exploding like feathers from a gutted pillow, papers scattering across linoleum like forgotten truths finally released. No one moved. Not right away. But they were no longer watching a courtroom. They were watching a crime scene. And Officer Cole? He didn't shout, didn't justify. He simply adjusted his stance, resting a hand on his holster like nothing had happened, like violence could still make the world tilt in his favor. But this time, the world didn't tilt. Jordan slowly got to her feet, hand pressing against the bruised side of her ribcage. She didn't cry, didn't scream. She just picked up her papers one by one. And with every movement, she spoke a silent truth. I'm still here. The judge didn't strike his gavel. He couldn't. He was staring at the woman who had just been kicked down, only to rise taller than the institution that let it happen. And Cole? He looked around and saw no one meeting his eyes, not even the other cops. Not anymore. What would you do if the very system built to protect you turned against your dignity? And when the truth stands bruised but unbroken, would you rise with it or look away like nothing happened? This was no longer Malik Johnson's trial. It had just become Jordan Avery's reckoning, and the city was about to learn her name. The video of the kick hit the internet before Jordan Avery even made it home. It wasn't edited. No filters, no background music, no spin, just shaky hands, raw pixels, and Officer Travis Cole's voice spitting venom in a courtroom meant to protect the powerless. You people are society's trash. Then the thud, her body colliding with the bench like a dropped gavel from the heavens, and silence that felt heavier than a verdict. By midnight, it was viral. By morning, it was unavoidable. She didn't watch it. Jordan had seen enough recordings in her career, body cams that were accidentally deactivated, footage mysteriously corrupted, testimonies twisted beyond recognition. But this time, she wasn't behind the desk. She was the frame. She was the proof. And it made her sick. She sat alone in her office at 4:17 a.m., the building still breathing with the deep mechanical hush of janitors and night clerks. Her ribs ached with every breath, but not nearly as much as the thought that Malik, the boy she had raised more like a son than a brother, had almost disappeared into that system while everyone else just kept working, drinking coffee, filing papers, skimming emails. The city hadn't broken. It had just absorbed him, like it had done with so many boys who looked like him. That was the real horror, not the rage, not the injustice, the routine. On her desk was the sealed folder she'd taken from Internal Affairs the night before. Her first order as chief had been to request a full audit of every closed complaint involving Travis Cole. The folder was thick, but that wasn't the problem. It was too clean. 14 complaints over 12 years, all dismissed, most marked with the same stamp. No corroborating evidence. Officer deemed credible. But what made Jordan's hands clench wasn't what was there. It was what wasn't. Not a single suspension, no transfers, not even a memo of concern. She flipped to the final page and froze, a complaint from 2017, filed by a rookie officer. Name, Tyler Mancini. Allegation, coercion, procedural misconduct, and retaliation during a traffic stop that turned into a beating. Filed under internal concern. Outcome, resolved informally. Last note, requested reassignment. Resigned 3 months later. Jordan stared at the note so long, the paper began to blur. Her mind went to the quiet recruit she'd once seen in a hallway 5 years ago. Pale, nervous, eager to prove he wasn't soft. She remembered Cole standing behind him like a pillar. She remembered the way Mancini smiled too fast and blinked too much. And now, it made sense. He wasn't green. He was terrified. She closed the folder and leaned back, but couldn't breathe deeply. Pain lanced her side, right where Cole's boot had hit. Her phone buzzed. 3 missed calls from the mayor's office. 2 from the police union. 1 anonymous message with no name and no text. Just a photo of her apartment building. Taken at night. Through the window. She didn't flinch. But she didn't sleep either. By the time the sun began bleeding through the blinds, Jordan had made a decision. If they were watching her, they'd better be ready to see what comes next. At the morning briefing, she stood before her new task force, a mix of analysts, field officers, 1 former public defender, and, silently seated in the back, a woman named Lorraine West. Jordan had called her at dawn. Lorraine hadn't expected it. No one ever called her after her son Isaiah's complaint was shelved in 2013. She had stopped waiting for apologies, but she came. Because when Jordan spoke, it wasn't with pity, it was with recognition. She knew what it felt like to have the truth scrubbed from record. Now Lorraine sat at the table with a pen and notepad, her hands steady for the first time in years. "Starting today," Jordan said, "we're reopening every file that was marked closed with no video, no third-party verification, or dismissed based on officer credibility. Every one of them. And we're going to track which officers signed off on those dismissals. Not just the accused, the ones who protected them." She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. That evening, as she left HQ under a sky the color of iron, Jordan walked home. No motorcade, no escort, just her, the concrete, and the city that was beginning to blink awake. Halfway down 8th Street, she heard it. A low rumble. Not traffic. A motorcycle. No lights, no plate. She stepped aside, then paused. 3 men were walking behind her. Too close. Hoods up. Silent. She didn't run. She counted her steps. 4, 5, 7. At 9, she pivoted. One kick to the dumpster. Metal roared as it toppled into their path. She ducked through a side alley, heart hammering but steps precise. She didn't reach for her gun. Didn't need to. They weren't here to kill her. They were here to warn her. They wanted her to be just scared enough to pause, to delay, to doubt herself. But Jordan didn't pause. She filed the report an hour later. And on the burner phone one of them dropped. Forensic techs found a message. "Friday after 9 p.m., walks alone, always left side of road." No name, but the format, the phrasing, it matched the tactical memos Cole used in riot planning. Jordan didn't feel rage. She felt something colder. Something that whispered, this isn't about Cole anymore. It never was. How far should one woman go when the enemy isn't a man, but a system that wears 1,000 silent faces? And when the first punch fails to keep her down, what will they try next to stop her from dragging the truth into daylight? They didn't expect her to last the month. Not after the kick, not after the threats, not after the burner phone traced back to an old security contractor who used to guard community centers funded by the same grants that paid Officer Travis Cole's overtime. Not after the union warnings wrapped in legal courtesy. They thought she'd resign or fade or crack. But Jordan Avery didn't flinch. Instead, she did something no one had anticipated. She went quiet. For 3 weeks, there were no interviews, no public statements. She declined every invitation, every headline. But inside the 4th floor conference room at precinct headquarters, the lights stayed on deep into the night. With every passing day, her team unpacked the machinery that had allowed men like Cole to thrive. The forms with pre-checked boxes, the performance bonuses tied to raw arrest numbers, the silence paid for in holiday shifts and commendations. Jordan didn't give speeches. She gave people back their names. One file stood out. Darius Cole, arrested in 2017 for resisting. No video, no witness, just a signed confession and a hospital report with bruises shaped like regulation batons. When Jordan found him living in a shelter complex on the west side, he didn't want to talk. But she didn't come with cameras. She just sat. She let the silence hold the pain until it thawed. And when Darius finally said, "You're the first one to ask what really happened," Jordan just nodded, as if that sentence alone was the reason she took this job. But the pressure outside the walls was mounting. Whispers of political overreach, claims she was weaponizing past trauma, anonymous tips to media outlets accusing her of personal bias. A state oversight committee quietly issued a memo suggesting the city pause public disclosures until internal reviews conclude. It was the same strategy Cole had once used on victims. Delay, deflect, deny. Then came the night Aaron knocked on her door. He didn't say anything at first, just stood there in the hallway of her small apartment, wearing that same gray hoodie from the day he was arrested, except now he wore it like armor. Jordan let him in, made tea, and waited. "I made a video," he said eventually. "I just told the truth. What happened? What it felt like to be handcuffed without being heard, and what it felt like to watch you get kicked because you refused to bow." She froze, cup in hand. "I didn't want to be quiet anymore," Aaron said. "And I didn't make it for views. I made it so someone else who's scared might stop being. The next morning, the video had over 70,000 shares. By nightfall, it had gone global. Not because of editing, not because of drama, but because of his voice. Calm, raw, full of something deeper than rage, truth. And suddenly, the silence Jordan had spent months fighting wasn't hers to carry alone anymore. It echoed across cities, across comment sections, across generations of people who had once believed their pain had no place in the record. That same week, the district attorney's office announced the formal detainment of Officer Travis Cole. No vague language, no administrative leave, just 3 charges: abuse of authority, unjustified civilian assault, obstruction of justice. For the first time in his career, Travis Cole was in custody, not as a symbol of strength, but as proof that unchecked power could finally be held accountable. The day they brought him into Eastwood detention, Jordan didn't show up. She stayed behind, reading through the final batch of complaint files from the 2010s. Some were handwritten, some were faxed in with faded ink. One had been scrawled on a torn receipt. Most had never even received a reply. That night, she compiled them into a single document, the names we forgot. No graphics, no policy lingo, just page after page of people once erased from the system. She uploaded it to the city's public records site and attached a quiet note. "We're not here to fix the past. We're here to make sure it can't hide anymore." The document went viral, not for its content, but for its humility. It didn't promise change. It proved it had begun. 1 month later, the city council sent Jordan 3 proposed designs for a new municipal flag: a gavel, a stylized flame, a circle of unity. She rejected all 3. She sent back a handwritten note. "Let the flag be blank. No slogan, no icon, just the color of faded paper. So we all remember what justice looks like when it's forgotten." They raised it at dawn. No ceremony, no marching band, just a square of white-gray fabric rising over City Hall, still and silent. Some passersby stared, some cried. No one clapped. And Jordan? She wasn't there. She was already back at the precinct, sleeves rolled, eyes scanning the next wave of review cases. She didn't want a monument. She wanted continuity. That afternoon, someone slid an envelope under her door. No name. No sender. Inside was a photo, surveillance footage, the waiting room at Eastwood. Travis Cole, sitting, alone. His eyes weren't angry. They were lost. There was a note taped to the back. "You have no badge, no uniform. So who are you now?" Jordan didn't smile, but she did breathe fully for the first time in months, because she wasn't afraid of that question anymore. She had answered it, not in words, but in every quiet step she had taken into rooms meant to keep people like her out. In every name she had returned to the record. And in the city that had once called her radical, now asking, what can we learn from her silence? How did this story make you feel? And what part will stay with you the longest? Comment 100 if this story moved you. Where are you watching from? Share this with a friend who needs to believe that quiet resistance can still shake the ground. Thank you for watching Life Stories.